Hey everybody, welcome to the end of the year traditional duology, where the first video is talking about every book I read this year in 2024. Let's dive into it real quick, shall we? So, the first book I read this year was The Troop by Nick Cutter. I thought this was very good. I got some dust on it. Thought this was very good. Very old classics, horror, very graphic also. I would recommend this, but I can't in good conscience because there's a lot of graphic scenes where animals are getting killed. I feel like can I just say real quick, just candidly, as an author and as a society, I think we need to move past the character kills innocent animals to depict themselves to show that they are a serial killer thing. There's a very graphic scene in here where a young boy kills a kitten to prove that he's a psychopath. This is a third-person book, so you have every option to simply just throw us into their mind. Like, you don't need to do this. You don't need to show us killing a kitten. Just show them being a psycho. We can figure it out from there. Please. I'm so tired of graphic depictions of kittens getting killed. It's disgusting. And then there's another depiction of a turtle that gets killed. They're trying to kill it to get some food, and they don't know where turtle organs are, so they just stab it a whole bunch and just leave it there bleeding to death. It's just, the whole thing is super uncomfortable if you are an animal lover, and I don't know if I can in good conscience recommend that. Moving on from there, though. Okay, you know what? It's going to stay like this. I can still grab it. We have The Whisper Man by Alex North. If that name sounds familiar to you, it's because I read The Shadows in 2022. And I felt like it was underwhelming because it led up to like making it seem like it was a supernatural thing and then just didn't wind up being supernatural. So knowing that it probably wasn't going to be supernatural in this book, I went into it not expecting that and was pleasantly surprised by how well this book was handled. I think this one is objectively better than Shadows, because there's way less try to red herring you with the supernatural. The overall theme of fatherhood is well handled too, and I just genuinely thought that it was a little bit more enjoyable. The main character was more enjoyable. The overall story was interesting. So yeah, I think that for his first novel, this was good. I believe this was his first novel, and I think he handled it a little bit better than he did with The Shadows. Or maybe reading The Shadows first and knowing that he wasn't going to take the supernatural route lowered my expectations with this one a little bit better. Either way, this one's not bad. I could see somebody enjoying that. Moving on to ones that I just did not like. One that I did not like. The Final Girl Support Group. This is supposed to be like a critique, parody, spoof, something of slasher movies and the final girl trope as a whole. There's a character for like Texas Chainsaw, there's a character for like Scream, there's a character for like Halloween, and it didn't work. It didn't work. The main character freaking sucks. I just can't stand the main character. I'm gonna spoil something here because like you need to understand how bad this main character is, right? So when all this stuff starts going down, somebody starts killing the women in the group. She starts going after like all of the people to try and like group them together and shit. You know, strength in numbers mentality, which is fine. Nothing wrong with that. That's probably your objectively best option. But one of the girls gets put in prison. The Halloween final girl stand-in. She gets put in prison because it's supposed to be like she didn't kill her brother who was killing everybody. She killed an innocent man or something. So they put her in prison. They were holding her for a while. They needed to figure out how to get to her ranch because they thought that'd be the best place for her. Now, this woman's wife is dying of cancer. She's in a hospice, right? So they go to the hospice, try to get her to talk to them, tell them where the ranch is. She doesn't know what the fuck's going on. Her brain's just not functioning. She's on her deathbed, literally. They just take her out of the hospice, and for some reason the doctors are okay with it. Like, nobody tries to stop them. They just take her out the hospice, and I'm like, okay. And they're driving around, and they're like, oh, we should stop at a park so that way she doesn't die in a car. And I'm like, okay, this is stupid. I take her out the van, take her to a park. They're sitting with her, still trying to get her to talk, and she dies. She dies, just straight up dies. Then they leave her with an old man for company. They call the police, let them know that she's dead. And they leave her with an old man, right? And that's not the worst part about the whole thing. No, the worst part about the whole thing is that we find out later on, they get to the ranch, and the Halloween final girl starts beating the crap out of the main character, which is pretty deserved. Even the main character acknowledges this is deserved. But that's more her like self-loathing martyr bullshit complex thing that they try to force on her in this. We find out from the Halloween girl that when the police got there and the ambulance got there to take her wife's dead body, the old man they left her with was trying to shove his tongue down her throat. Yeah, that was probably the moment I was like, no, this main character, she sucks. She's the worst fucking main character I've ever read in my life. And then it like devolves into just a straight up slasher movie, but instead of a guy with a machete, it's a guy with a freaking AK. So it's just like, whatever. It just became white noise at the end, because I was just like, I'm not enjoying this. This is not very fun. This is not what it was proposed to be. I don't know what happened, but I just don't like it. Moving on to one I can be a little bit more positive about. Dead of Winter by Darcy Coates. This one is actually just a straight up slasher. It's a group of people. They get stuck in a little hut in the woods during a blizzard and slowly start getting picked off by somebody. I'm not going to spoil this one because I actually do think this one is worth reading. But I will say that the killer, his motive, his plan, and why he did the things he did, bro just goes full scorched earth. Like Thanos snaps these cats out of existence like that. And I'm just sitting here like, okay. When you find out why and you find out his motive, it's like, it's not unreasonable, but bro really went and just got everybody. Like, my God, dude, he went and got everyone for this. And I'm just sitting here like, wow, okay, that's crazy. But yeah, definitely, I'd say check this one out. I would easily recommend this. This is probably one of my favorite wintertime horror novels I've read in a while. Moving on to something I don't recommend, The Ritual by Adam Novell. This is going to be the only time in my entire life I will say this. You should watch the movie instead of reading the book. This book is dirty, it's grimy, it's gross. Like, in the second half, the main character is the only surviving member of his group, right? And he gets kidnapped by some cultists, two dudes and a chick. They're constantly naked, they're constantly dancing, singing, screaming metal. There's a part where he tries to escape and he gets chased down by the chick. She catches him, throws herself on him, and like sits on his face. And you get what I'm going at. He describes the smell, and I'm just like, oh my God, this is disgusting. I don't want to read this. I actually genuinely think that the movie handled the idea better. I think that the movie handled the creature better, because when you get to actually see the creature at the end, it's just nowhere near as cool as the one in the movie. I feel bad because I picked up a bunch of this guy's other books. You probably can't see them too well up there because they're blocked by everything right now. But I picked up a bunch of his other books because I was like, okay, this guy's probably interesting. So I picked up a bunch of his other books because I was like, all right, this guy's probably interesting. And now I'm just like kind of slowly dreading reading more of his stuff. But I feel like that's the wrong mentality to have. Moving on to what is objectively my favorite things I've read this year. Hang on, I'm going to have to try and make this work. These are some big, thick boys. The Bloodsworn Trilogy by John Gwynne. Fury of the Gods, Shadow of the Gods, Hunger of the Gods, and then Fury of the Gods. This is a Norse mythology inspired trilogy that is very well crafted. The character writing is phenomenal. It follows 3 main characters from the first book and then 5 main characters in the next 2. Although I would argue that at the end of it, there's still only 1 true main character, but I don't want to say too much on it. I recommend it. It's very violent, very graphic, very action-packed, and very heavily character-focused. There's a lot of themes of found family, actual family, your legacy that you leave behind, the legacy that your parents left behind, not becoming like your parents. It's very well crafted. I wouldn't say it's groundbreaking like anything like Brandon Sanderson has written, but sometimes you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You just need to hone your craft to a fine edge. And that it feels like exactly what John Gwynne did with this series, because he has this whole trilogy crafted exquisitely, and it even follows like the classic rising and falling that you see in this second book, where like, yeah, there's victory, but there's also like bad defeat as well. So it's very interesting. But moving on from there, I actually found myself in a bit of a lull, because the first two I read before the third one came out. So I read 3 books in the meantime. The first one being Chasing the Boogeyman by Richard Chizmar. And this one was pretty interesting. It's a crime, well, I don't know if crime thriller. It's a mystery novel set in the 1980s. My only real criticism is that it feels like it jumps through some hoops to justify this killer having any like interest in the main character. But beyond that, like, it's really good. The main character is just a guy in his like early 20s, fresh out of high school or college, trying to start a magazine, and it's very good. I think it captures a nostalgia for the 80s pretty well. Obviously, I'm only 25. I was not even thought of in the 80s, so I have no real judgment on that. But I could definitely recommend this. It's very interesting, and I could honestly see somebody enjoying this. I enjoyed it, obviously, but not as much as I feel like I could have. Because if someone is in like their 30s or their 40s has good nostalgia for the 80s, this will probably hit way closer to home than it did for me. That being said, though, moving on, we have The Kaiju Preservation Society by John Scalzi. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. So, Mr. Scalzi here took some ideas from Pacific Rim. This is a story where there's an alternate reality with giant kaijus in it. The kaijus have some biomechanical nuclear reactors, which is interesting. My only problem with this, there's only 2 big issues I had with this. The first is that it doesn't describe the kaiju very well. There's a few like quick descriptor things like tentacles, Lovecraftian, stuff like that, to try and let you make your own imagination with it or whatever. But I would have loved a little bit more depiction of the kaijus. I feel like, you're making a kaiju novel. Kaiju are going to be selling it. You should describe what the kaiju look like. It also winds up just kind of falling into the classic billionaire evil dude stereotype at the end, to the point where the entire ending is just kind of white noise. It's not bad, and I could honestly see an interesting world developing from this book. I think if the author wanted to pick this up and make a sequel or even a spin-off, I would easily buy that, because I honestly think that this was pretty well done. I just wish it would have taken a more scientific route with the kaiju, because it feels like a lot of the sci-fi is just kind of hand-waved, and that's not terrible. Like, obviously, that's kind of what you have to do sometimes with sci-fi, but I just feel like it could have been explored a little bit better. After that, Robert Holdstock's The Hollowing held my attention for like 2 months, and I did not enjoy this book, like, at all. I don't know if this is just not my type of fantasy. I know that it was the second book in a trilogy, so maybe if I read the first one first and the third one after, it would have been a little bit better, but I just could not get into this book, like, at all. I had so many questions, none of them got answered. The book doesn't even end in a satisfying conclusion. It just... There's an entire chapter of a dude and a chick just going primal and doing a mating dance and a mating song, and the whole thing is just so boring and bad, and I just did not like it. I don't have a very good selection of books this year, apparently. So I can't recommend this one in good conscience. Although, I don't know, because it might just be like, maybe it's just because it's not my type of fantasy, but there's whole chapters in this book that just go nowhere. They do nothing for the story, they do nothing for the characters, and I'm just sitting here like, why are you in here? Why do we spend a whole 2 chapters focused on a character who dies and never comes back and has no influence on the main character at all? Why is there a villain introduced like a quarter of the way through, disappearing at the halfway point, and not doing anything after that? It just... I don't know. I guess you could pick this one up if you wanted to. If you read the entire trilogy, this might be better. But I just didn't like it. Moving on to the final book, The Ballad of Black Tom by Victor Lavelle. I believe is how that's pronounced. I'm probably mispronouncing it, though. This one's really good, actually. I just finished it today. It's very short. It's not even 150 pages. It's 149, which is kind of crazy. It is about a black guy in 1920s America who falls into some Lovecraftian bullshit. It is, I will say, though, given that it is taking place in the 1920s, it does have, you know, racist elements that will probably make people uncomfortable the same way that To Kill a Mockingbird does. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't read it the same way that it doesn't mean you shouldn't read To Kill a Mockingbird. I would actually recommend this as well. I don't want to spoil too much about it, but it's very obvious that there's a lot of passion in this book and a lot of criticism on the society, of the parts of society, the rules of society that were in place then and are unfortunately still in place today. So I would definitely recommend checking this one out as well. Moving on from there, though, we're going to move to the graphic novels and comics and manga and all the other stuff I've read this year. Starting off with Cryptid Club by Sarah Anderson, author of Sarah Scribbles and Fangs. And this is nothing major. It is just a collection of her cryptid-themed comics that she's put on Facebook, Instagram, you know, all of her social media over the years. And I've always been a fan of her stuff. I've never not read a comic of hers that I didn't like. So I picked this up. It's a fun read. You can spit it out in a couple hours. It's not that bad. And it gives you a fun laugh. There's plenty you can go back to in this. The second one I read this year was My Favorite Thing is Monsters Book 2. And let me just say right now, the artwork in this is still... is still absolutely gorgeous. There's a lot of well done LGBT representation, LGBT stuff in here. I hate to use this word, but this is very woke. If you want to use it like that, I recommend it. The story is great. Put up with the first one. It could easily make my favorite of the graphic novels I've ever read. And I love one small thing I love about this. So I'm going to show you this real quick. The last thing in it, the last page is just My Favorite Thing is Monsters, right? But after that, there's like 2 whole pages that are just blank notebook sheets. Like the kid finished drawing but didn't use all of the notebook. It's beautiful. Smartest fucking thing I've ever seen. Because the art is still very reliant on this style that looks like it's drawn in a child's notebook, and it's so gorgeous. The story is fantastic. Pick this one up and pick up the first one. Support Emil Ferris with whatever her endeavors are, because this woman handcrafts some of the most gorgeous art I've ever seen in the last decade and a half. That's not from Berserk. I want to preface that. Obviously, I'm not an art critic, so there might be some graphic novels that are better drawn or more technically skilled, but I just love this art because it's so aesthetically beautiful. Moving on from that, Lore Olympus Volume 6. This one ends with Minthe getting turned into a plant. I still think the story's pretty good. I do acknowledge that there might be some problematic elements that some people might be uncomfortable with, but I still think it's really good because I don't think there's that many of them that would really alter my view of this. And moving on from that is Seconds by Brian Lee O'Malley. And you can see right there, author of the Scott Pilgrim series. That was enough to make me pick this up alone, because I was expecting another fun, silly romp. It's not that. See, I will say right now, I love Scott Pilgrim, the entire franchise, everything about it. It's beautiful, fantastic, great pieces of artwork, all of them. But I think the comedy and the action kind of overshadows the very subtle character writing that's in Scott Pilgrim, with the desire for a 20-something-year-old to become better. And this, with all that stripped away, really shines. Because it's got some jokes, it's got some funny moments in here. But predominantly, it's carried by the characters. And it's a great thing to see an author actually start getting, legitimate praise for his writing skills. Gotta hand it to the man. He knows how to make some good characters. And I should probably make a video about Scott Pilgrim at some point in the future. Maybe. I might get into that. Next up, Junji Ito's Alley. There aren't any really standout stories in this one the way that there are with some of the other ones. It's a lot of his shorter stuff, which isn't terrible. I honestly feel like he doesn't excel in shorter stories the way that he does with his longer stuff like Kyo, like Uzumaki, like Tomoe. Like, those are the stories I think he does his best work in. There's some standout short stories too, but predominantly I think the longer ones let him really stretch his legs and get to the root of what makes this thing scary or this thing terrifying. Whereas this other stuff is just like, this is scary! If a short story by Junji Ito feels like Five Nights at Freddy's, a longer novel by Junji Ito feels like Silent Hill. Is probably the best way I can describe it. But moving on from there, the final one I read was Volume 7 of Lore Olympus. This one ends with the court case getting started. I think the story is very interesting. I would like to see, well, I don't know what I would like to see from this, honestly. I think the art is still really good, even if some of the colors need to be differentiated a little bit better. And I honestly don't. I think I still like this. I know there is a large group of people online who don't, which, fine, to each their own, you know. I'm not going to criticize you. But I don't know. I just don't really see too many problems with this. I think the art's good. I think there's great comedy in it. It's kind of just the thing I excel at enjoying. So, moving on, I do have a fun thing I want to announce real quick. Next year, I don't know if I'm even going to be doing one of these, because next year I'm going to be reading all 15, yes, that's right, 14 plus the prequel, to The Wheel of Time. And I want to do a whole video on it where I review it, where I review each book individually, so it'll be a lot of fun. Hopefully, it'll be done by the end of next year. Or even before that, ideally. I don't know. I should be cleared up a little bit on free time next year. I don't want to get too much into that yet. That's a topic for another time. But what have you guys read this year? What do you recommend reading? Let me know down in the comments below, and I will see you tomorrow.